Hello and welcome to the Biz Daily. Today we're talking about the news that MAG Interactive has bought Delinquent. Now these are two mobile game developers you've probably not heard of. You're probably thinking kind of this is not the biggest news of the day. And maybe it's not the biggest news of the day, but sometimes we like to kind of pick apart smaller news items to look at some trends. So to kind of go back on the facts, so MAG Interactive is a Swedish developer. They're best known for the word game Ruzzle. And to go back in history, it's kind of quite interesting that MAG Interactive were not a well-known game developer at all. They were kind of one of the kind of first breed of kind of game developers, certainly in Europe, to kind of pick up on iPhone, smartphone development. So Ruzzle came out in 2012, and initially just in Swedish. It was very successful in Sweden. So it's a head-to-head game, a bit like a kind of a Boggle type game where you have a kind of a set grid of words and you have to make as many words as possible out of that kind of set grid. As time's gone on, they've kind of gone from iPhone to iPad. They've added more languages, and they've kind of recently released a more kind of, I guess, kind of a kind of not such a head-to-head version, but a more kind of like a Candy Crush Saga type approach with a Ruzzle adventure. And they've kind of been sitting there in Sweden, and they've kind of been making this kind of game and improving it and adding more languages, supporting it, and they've been very successful. And it's kind of interesting because originally it was kind of an ad-funded game, or you could buy to get rid of the ads. It wasn't a kind of heavy monetization game in terms of how we understand free-to-play games now, because you just can't really do it with that gameplay. But they've had 50 million downloads now, and they have quite a high retention of players. Obviously people tend to be playing it, when people start off they tend to be playing it against kind of friends that they know, and then depending on the skill level they might move on to also play against just other players who are at the same skill level, so you have that kind of nice mixture. But I think it's something we kind of sometimes forget when we're covering the kind of the Supercells and the Gung-Hos and the Machine Zones of the world, that there are a lot of small developers. I mean, MAG Interactive would not say they're a large team, but they're doing a very good business there, and they have a very strong presence in that niche market of word games, and they have a really good business, and that's now allowing them to kind of branch out. So they did do some venture investment a couple of years ago, where they raised $6 million. So it's, depending on, it's not an enormous sum of money. Equally, it's not a small sum of money. And they actually invested in Delinquent when Delinquent kind of announced itself. So to go into a bit more information on Delinquent, the Delinquent is one of those teams which is stuffed full of veterans. So the CEO used to work at PopCap, David Bishop, quite well known, and he was quite senior in PopCap in Ireland, where they did all their mobile development. So he's worked on things like Plants vs Zombies and all the kind of all the PopCap games. Equally, someone else who was one of the co-founders of Delinquent was David Amor, who is quite well known because he was one of the founders of Relentless Games in Brighton, and they did a lot of work for Sony, most famously kind of the Buzz series of games for PlayStation, but lots of other things as well. There's a few other kind of veteran kind of game types who've been around with Delinquent. And Delinquent haven't really actually released their first game yet. It's a game called Potion Pop. So that's a match 3 game. They've been in soft launching. That's been in soft launch for a long period of time. So you might see kind of on one scheme of things, quite small companies kind of one buying the other. It's not a world shattering headline, but I think it is interesting that you're kind of seeing now where we are in mobile games. We are very much entered, in the West at least, a mature phase. So there's some of these companies like MAG Interactive. They've been around now successfully for like 4 years, or getting on for 4 years, kind of making money, getting investments, understanding the business, and now you're kind of seeing the easiest way for them to kind of pick up new talent is not to build a new team. That's quite expensive. It's actually easier for them to look around and say, who could we buy, who's got good IP, who's got good games that are coming out, and build their company that way. And now that's what we're seeing. We're not really seeing so much of these kind of teams start up and launching and being very successful. In fact, we're seeing the opposite. We're seeing some quite well-funded teams launching very big games and not really going anywhere. Partly because it's very expensive now to enter the market. I mean, one of the reasons that Delinquent were quite happy to be acquired by MAG is that the Ruzzle game has created such a big network of users for them, so they don't have to spend a lot of money on user acquisition. I mean, they might do, but to launch, they immediately have a kind of a network of people who they know play a certain type of game and who probably will like their match 3 game. So you're kind of seeing, I think now we're kind of seeing this kind of coalescing of kind of mature markets, mature companies, and much less space really maybe for the startups. Whereas maybe like 2 or 3 years ago we would have looked at a Delinquent and like, are they going to come up with the next big game? It's very difficult now for small startups to kind of enter that phase. It's very hard for big startups as well. So that's, I think, where we're seeing this trend, where we're seeing the companies who have been successful in the space, they're the ones who are now kind of growing and kind of expanding their success. I think that's a trend that we're going to see for the next kind of months and probably years. So that was the news for today. I hope to see you tomorrow.